In this lecture, we will start with new unit, Assessment in Practice. The lecture will summarize process assessment model. Till now, we talked about process reference model of automotive spice. Now, we will zoom in to the process assessment model and go through the capability levels, which are higher than 1. Before we start, we need to think about why we need assessment. There are two aspects of why we need it. First one is that we need it because of the process improvement. And the second one is that we need it because of the process-related product risks. In the first solution, when we have the process improvement, it means that we will continuously check our project. It means that we will be focused on the processes and we will base our ratings of the processes on the basis on exemplary samples. It means that we will be a little bit less stricter because we will think about processes in the way how they're performing on the various projects. This type of assessment is used basically for the internal assessments, and it is the main input of the PDCA register. For the product-related assessment or process-related product risk assessments, the focus is on the process and product quality. It means that this is a little bit more stricter assessment, and it is basically second and third party assessment. It is always requested from the customer, and maybe even it is requested for the serious production. In this way of assessing, we will check where the project is. If the project is near some very mature phase, we will be stricter in assessing the product and we will be stricter in assessing the outputs of the product. Then, in this product assessment, we will for sure check all the relationships in between processes, especially the ones which are traced in the V model. In order to continue with the process assessments and to understand how we will do the assessments, we need to understand what is the process instance. For example, in the previous slide, I explained two different types of assessments. And when I say yes, for the first type, where we want to assess only the process improvement, we will use several instances of a process. What that means? Well, it means that there is this one X, and for example, supplier monitoring process for the one business unit or one project is one process instance. For the improvement, we will check the same process in the different projects or different business units, and then we will check more instances. For the process where we want to check the product and process risk and the assessment, we will then use one process instance for the already selected processes which are forming process profile. It means that if we are assessing the project 1, we will check the 1 instances in each of the processes in the process profile. Now let's talk about categories of the assessments. Depending on the number of the process instances, the assessments are divided into 3 classes. First class is the class which will need at the minimum 4 process instances for each assessment process. Then for the class 2, we will need 2 process instances at the minimum for such an assessment. For the class 3, there are no any requirements beyond the basic requirements of the standard. And if we zoom in to the classes and where those classes are used. We can say that basically if there are fewer than the required number of the process instances for any of the classes, we can say that in, of course, organization, we can say that the instances which are there can be selected. That means that it is not strictly said that for the class 1 you should use 4 as a minimum process instances, because it could be also less if the company do not have them. This categorization of the assessments help all the assessors to explain what is the scope of the assessment. The previous categorization is telling us how many instances we will use. In this slide, we have the types of the assessments, and both of them, the categorization and the types, must be part of the scope of some assessment. And to understand the types of the assessment, it is necessary to divide the body performing the assessment, lead assessor, and the other assessors like co-assessor and similar. In the case of the type A assessment, of the project or of any kind of organizational unit is performed in the way that body performing the assessment is fully independent of the organization being assessed. And also the lead assessor and all co-assessors must be fully independent on the company of which is assessed. In the type B, we have the same situation with the body which is performing the assessment. It means that the company which is performing, or the body which is performing the assessment, must be fully independent of organization being assessed. For the lead assessor, we have the same situation. Independency is the must. But for the co-assessor, there should be let's say some kind of the co-assessor which is in the company which is assessed, but which is belonging to some separate business unit or separate entity in the whole organization, which is not for sure part of the organization, part of business unit which is under assessment. Those two types of the assessments are basically corresponding to the second and third party of assessment, which is part of Annex D of the standard. Type C and Type D are practically corresponding to notation of the internal assessment. In the Type C, you have the body and the lead assessor and assessor, which are not independent which are not a different company, different organization, but they are independent of the assessed part of the company. In the type D, you have also the body, which will be independent, but the lead assessor and co-assessor can be part of the same organizational unit. Now we are coming to the most important part of the automotive spice SPAM. On the left image, you can see that automotive spice has 5 capability levels used for determination of how stable the project or company is. They are organized as follows. For example, on the highest level, you have something which is called innovative. And on the lowest level, you have the level which is called performing. Each of the levels inside of these 5 levels, of course, because this capability level 0 is not the level for sure, has some process attributes. We will talk about what are the process attributes later on, but you need to know that on the capability level 1, performing, the one that we already discussed through the base practices, you need to have the process attribute which is called process performance. It means that all the outcomes that we mentioned in the previous lectures must be achieved. In the second level, which is called managed, there are two process attributes. One is performance management, and another one is work product management. You remember that I said that management process is heavily impacting performance management level 2, and that supporting processes like configuration management and supporting management are heavily impacting level 2 as well, but the work product management. This means for the capability level 2 that performance is controlled, planned, monitored, adjusted, and that all the responsibilities are defined, that results are quality checked and managed. In the level 3, which is the first stable level of automotive spice, we have also two process attributes. One is process definition and another one is process deployment. What that means? It means that we want to have a set of specific standard processes for the organization, and that we are using them, and that we are deploying them, and that we are preparing the learnings for the improvement of the standard. On the level 4, we have predictable processes. There are also two process attributes. One is process management and another one is process control. It means that we have quantitative data about process performance and that those data are measured, recorded, and statically analyzed to allow objective decisions. On the level 5, which is almost like a science for all the companies in the world, we have the process innovation and implementation. It means that we want to investigate what are the process improvements which are led us to some kind of quantitative feedback, and that everything that we have on the lower levels we will now reuse for innovating our company. This other picture is practically summarizing the additional way of checking the maturity. The first one is capability levels, as I said already, checking the separate projects. And another one is organizational maturity levels, which can check the whole organization. They're a little bit different in naming, like a basic, managed, established, predictable, and innovating. And they refers to the organization. This is not widely used, basically, organizational maturity levels framework, because it is still in the starting point, and um, some companies only started with this organizational maturity levels. The idea is that all the companies in the automotive will be in such a state that we will have the opportunity to assess only organizational maturity levels. Because for the project capability levels, you need to check constantly on each of the projects. But if we put it on the organizational maturity level, we will then have less assessments, and most of the companies and most of the OEMs are interested in this topic. The process assessment model offers indicators in order to identify whether the process outcomes and the process attribute outcomes are present or absent in the instantaneous processes of project and organizational units. These indicators provide guidance for assessors in accumulating the necessary objective evidences to support judgment of capability. They are not intended to be regarded as a mandatory set of checklists to be followed, but they are some guidance which could be used. In order to judge the presence or absence of the process, outcome and process achievement, and an assessment obtains object evidences. All such evidences comes from the assessment of work products and repositories and content and documents and the reviews. The evidences are mapped to the PAM indicators to allow establishing the correspondence to the relevant process outcomes and process attribute achievements. There are two types of indicators. One is process performance indicator, and another one is process capability indicator. The process performance indicator, which apply exclusively to the capability level 1, provide an indication of the extent of fulfillment of the process outcomes. The process capability indicator, which apply to capability levels 2 to 5, are providing an indicator of the extent of fulfillment of the process attribute achievements. Assessment indicators are used to confirm that certain practices were performed as shown by evidence collected during the assessment. All such evidences comes either from the examination of the work products or from statements made by the performing and managers of the processes. The existence of best practices and work products provided evidences of the performance of the process associated with them can be found in the assessment report. Similarly, the existence of the process capability indicators provide evidences of process capability. There are process performance indicators and process capability indicators. And types of process performance indicators are best practices, work products, and all of them are only used for the level 1, as I already said. Process capability indicators, as already explained, what are they? In contrast, are used for a generic type, and they are applied on the processes on the level 2 to 5. We have generic practices and generic resources. The differences between generic practices and generic resources is that the former represent activity-oriented indicator, while the latter represent infrastructure-oriented indicators for judging objective evidences. Now let's check those capability levels in detail. We have 5 of them. We have 9 process attributes, and each of them can be reached only if we reach all the process attributes related to them with largely or fully. We will discuss about ratings later, but if you want to achieve the level 3 or level 4, it means that you need to achieve the previous levels as they are written in the automotive spice in order to reach the higher levels. Each of the process attributes has a generic practice related to that. It is like you have on the level 1 generic practice 111 achieving the process outcomes, which is compliant of the base practices which we discussed already in all the processes. On the level 2, we have more than one generic practice. You can see that for a process attribute to one performance management process attribute, we have 7 of them. And for PI 2.2, we have even 4 of them. Well, I just put the colors here, different colors here, because I wanted to show you how they are grouped and how you can easily learn about what are the generic practices in some of the project attributes. This will help you to understand the overall concept of how we are using the process attributes. In the similar way, like we know that in the base practices are very, very specific to every single process. Here, all the generic practices are used for all of the processes, but they are only mapped to the certain area. In this first color, which is added here, and the second one, we have, as we already said, dependency with management process. It means that management process is heavily related to them. Then, in this first part, first four of them, we have some grouping of the management activities, like objectives, planning, and tracking. And when you read through them, you will see that they're really, really connected to the management process of any of the processes. For example, GP 2.1.1 is saying that we need to identify the objectives for the performance of the process. Next one is telling us that we need to plan the performance of the processes to fully fulfill the identified objectives. Then we have the monitoring and adjusting. This is telling us that basically all four of them are really the basic of the management process. Then we have the next group, which I'm calling team and communication. You can see that even both of the groups are related to the management process. There are the differences. In these three generic practices, we have definition of the responsibilities and authorities. We have then identification of the available resources, and we have the management of the involved parties. This is also basic on the management process, and only by reaching all of the generic practices listed here, you can say that your management is really working. In the next part, in this PA 2.2 work product management process attribute, we can see two groups as well. First group is related to the quality assurance dependencies, and those are the review topics, GP 2.21 and GP 2.24. You can see that we need to have defined requirements for the work products. And on the basis of those definitions, we need to review and adjust work products to meet the defined requirements. The second group is related basically to the configuration management topics, because we have definition of the requirements for document and for control of the work products. We need to identify, document, and control all the work products on the basis of the defined requirements. And if you think in the direction that you have the heavily related processes like MAN 3 and SUP 1, SUP 8, in these two process attributes, you will easily understand how level 2 is working. In the next level, which is called established processes, we have also two process attributes. First one is process definition process attribute. Then second one is process deployment. You can think about those two like whatever could be standardized on the company level, it should be defined. And this 3.1 is telling us that standard process is defined. Then that standard defined process also defining the roles. And that there is a way how we are measuring the process efficiency for the already defined criteria for the standard process. In the PI 3.2, there is a process deployment of those standards. It means that GP 3.2.1 is telling us how we can deploy the process to satisfy the context specified requirements which are given in the previous process attributes. Then we have this one which is called doing standard measurements, and the one which you cannot see because of my picture, yeah, using standard resources. Well, it means that the whole process attributes is only summarizing deployment of the previous defined attribute 3.1. Since most of the companies on the world and basically most of the OEMs are just looking on the level 3 of capability level 3 of the automotive spice, we will not zoom in so much in the capability level 4 and 5 because they're almost not used in the market. They're just some guidance how we can reach them, but none of the companies and none of the OEMs can say that they're really there with the assessment model of the capability level 4 and 5. Here you can see that there are also two process attributes for both of the levels. In the predictable processes, we have a process attribute which is called quantitative analysis process attribute. And this is used for identifying business goals, establishing process information needs, and some similar stuff. It means that we now want to uh, um, have some identification of what are the things that we want to do and in the way that we can measure them on the, of course, company level, and to go even further to think about our future. In the PI 4.2, we have quantitative control process attribute. It means that we will control the processes of previous process attribute. For level 5, innovating process, we have also, as I said, two process attributes. First one is process innovation process attribute, and another one is process information innovation implementation process attribute. Again, almost similar with the level 3. We have something that we set, like innovation, and like all the process goals, like what we want to innovate in our company, and then we are implementing those innovations. In this picture, I wanted to summarize all the levels on one place. You can see that for first, let's say not level, but for the one which is not complete, 0, we have some kind of input and the processes are so not organized that we cannot divide them even in the block. For the level 1, we already have some input which is forming some kind of the processes and some kind of the outcomes. And then the output can be, of course, there because we will have some outcomes of the processes. In the level 2, we are now trying to manage in the same way all the processes that we have. On the level 3, we are even tailoring our needs per project, but it means that we need to have the standard process which is explaining how we can tailor for the specific needs of the process in the project. And of course, in all three levels, we have defined output, which was not basically on the level 0. In the level 4, we are now trying to do the same, but just trying to find what are the optimized values for the standard process. You can see this is one red, red mark, which is saying that we are trying to optimize it. On the level 5, we are even optimizing and innovating more and more because those lines which are red are not now the same for all the processes. They're different. And we are fine-tuning all the processes on the company level. On the last slide, we will repeat one image that I already showed to you. And we use it for explaining what is process assessment model, and that we are using what for goals of the processes. For the methods, we are using how, and for the execution, we are using the doing. But now we have some additional image, which is telling us how to perform the process assessment. Capturing experience acquired during product development in order to share the experience with others means creating a how level. However, a how is always specific to a particular context, such as a company, an organizational unit, or a product line. For example, the how of a project, organizational unit, or a company is potentially not applicable as it is to a project, organizational unit, or a company, another company B. However, both might be expected to adhere the principles represented by process assessment model. And both of the companies can use almost a similar framework, but these indicators, which are given by process assessment model, are the what level, while deciding on a solution for a concrete template for a concrete company is on the how level. I talked a lot about how, what, and what I wanted to say here is basically that, yeah, Automotive Spice is giving you what to do, and you can create the methods how you will do it as you like, and you will done doing the job and execute the job on the basis of how you described. It means that process assessment model, or in oral Automotive Spice, is not obligating you to do something. It is just giving you the framework, and just repeat that while you're on an assessment as someone who needs to explain how your project is working, or even if you're co-assessor in some assessments or lead assessor as well, you need to explain to the crowd what is the scope of your question on the assessment in the assessor's chair, or as a assessee, you need to explain how you are doing in your company. And this should be matched with outcomes and um, performance attributes, not the really generic practices and base practices. The exercise 8 will go in the direction that you need to explain from understanding the level 2 what are the real examples of the generic practices which are summarized through some kind of the presentation. Prepare for this exercise because there are a lot of things to be done.